You know, over the 1 year that Standard has existed, we've complained about like certain decks and certain cards. Like there's been OTT that kind of was around for a while, and then there was, you know, Zanbaku that people were complaining about. But I think none of those decks were really that problematic until we've reached our true problem child, in my opinion, which is Shirayuki. Now the thing with Shirayuki is that she's not only a really good card on her own, but the two other cards that support her are really easy to splash into basically any Murakumo build that you want, and that's why Zanbaku just plops in the 12 you know, Shirayuki based cards and just excels so well and is able to perform in tournaments really well, and I'm expecting it to dominate the meta for quite some time until like the Bermuda release, if anything, because I think it's going to be quite hard for a lot of decks to combat that. Like, let's go over, like, in case you don't know what Shirayuki does, is when placed on Rearguard, Vanguard, or Guardian Circle, you can Soul Blast 2, and then your opponent's front row loses 5k, but if you place it on Vanguard or Guardian Circle, then your opponent's front row loses 10k. Now this is huge because this immediately circumvents Axels, which is already something. It circumvents a single force marker on any single row, and on top of that, some decks like, I wonder which, DP, get pretty much destroyed by this because you build up your power. You have to like overcommit the power buildups by like at least 10k to be able to, you know, still do your skills, because if you know that Shirayuki is coming up, then you're gonna die. But if they have like 4 soul and they can do 2 of these in one turn, then it's impossible for decks like that to even do much. And even for, like, let's say for Narukami, a lot of their stuff gets killed by, like, you know, a plus 10k from a defensive trigger, or like Pale Moon. A lot of Axel decks, like in an Axel Mirror match, they'll be losing because Shirayuki just circumvents what they're trying to do. Shirayuki is basically a defensive trigger in a sense that isn't even once per turn, you know, without even taking that damage, which is pretty huge. And on top of that, she even has a Vanguard skill to boot, which is when her attack doesn't hit, you can just take a Shirayuki from your drop zone and add it to your hand. And that's not all, that's not the only ways for you to amass Shirayukis into your hand. They have the grade 2 Jakotsu Girl, who reads, when her attack doesn't hit, you look at the top 7, search for 2 Shirayukis, put 1 into your hand and 1 into your drop zone, and then shuffle your deck. But if you don't find any, then you Soul Charge 1, which is huge again because you need to Soul Blast 2 in order to use her skill. So even if you already have all your Shirayukis, you might as well just like whiff an attack with her. It can be on anything, doesn't have to be on Vanguard. Just like don't attack to not hit, and then just use her skill, get a Soul Charge 1 off, or get a Shirayuki in hand and then recycle it later, either with the Shirayuki's other skill or with our grade 1, which is Rainy Madame, whose skill is when your unit's attack doesn't hit, so any of your units, you can slide her into the soul, which is again +1 to soul, meaning you can reuse your Shirayukis, and then you can return a Shirayuki from your drop zone to your hand. All of the support is so like cohesive, it works so well together, everything is so well connected that it's so easy to use this archetype. You have a searcher, you have a recycler, you have like as soon as you use it to defend with, because I mean you can guard with it, it's a grade 3, you can guard with it, Soul Blast 2 minus 10k to the front row, next turn just like use Rainy Madame's skill to bring it back to your hand and get yourself an extra soul to reuse that Shirayuki again. So it's really good. Like, this whole thing is insanely good, and the fact that Zanbaku can just take all these cards and put it into the deck, together with Zanbaku's already amazing kind of game plan, is just insane, because Zanbaku's already kind of forcing your opponent to lose momentum. Like, they can't ride their grade 3s, can't generate gifts, can't use any kind of like on-ride skill either, and just like forces the whole kind of like game plan to change for both players. But on top of that, you got this whole thing going on where like they already lost momentum, but now they can't do anything. Like, they're stuck on like 1 Axel circle or 1 force marker, or like you already used up their 1 protect or something, and like they can't really push for much. Like even like a deer turn for OTT gets kind of, you know, pushed down pretty hard because of Shirayuki. And like you're running what, 10 grade 3, so it's not even like you're overcommitting or anything, and you're able to recycle those Shirayukis all the time. And like it's not just a defensive option too. You can easily just like ride the Shirayuki after a Zanbaku turn, minus 10k to your opponent's front row, and then if you have more soul to spare, just call another one, and then just like minus 5k again. Minus 15k to front row is huge. The opponent's Vanguard will be sitting at like -3 or -2, quick maths. and you're going to be able to just push them with attacks. And like, because you are an Axel deck, that's going to be even better because you're generating Axel circles at the same time, and it's just a ridiculous combo in my opinion. Like, a lot of decks just can't deal with it in my opinion, and the fact that we now have it in TCG is gonna, like, we're gonna see from a lot of the Springfest results just how well the card performs, just how well this whole engine performs. But I think for as long as Murakumo is gonna exist in Standard, these cards will be played, unless like they legit print some cards where like your power cannot be altered on your opponent's turn. But that'd be crazy because you can't even use triggers then. So I don't think we're ever gonna have something that like really addresses this, but these cards are insane. And like, Shirayuki is just a triple rare. She's not even the VR of the set, but she's like, in Japanese, she was actually more expensive than the VR at some point. And so that's just how crazy Shirayuki is, and it's really an amazing card. And the fact that like these decks can get away with it and just like play it with ease without really like hindering their deck build much is actually pretty wild in my opinion. I'm also not going to ignore the fact that, I mean, obviously Murakumo does Soul Blast quite a bit, because Zanbaku needs to Soul Blast. Left Arrestor, like, you're not going to use that skill anymore. Let's face it, like, you're going to save that soul for Shirayuki because it's so much more valuable, but like, you're still going to Soul Blast with Zanbaku at least, and so that's something to consider, I guess, but you're gonna have to just be careful with what you're soul blasting and just try to keep rewriting your grade 3s in order to do that, and then use the Rainy Madam as well as the Jakotsu Girl to keep generating some soul as well. So I think this deck, like, there's still some matchups where I think the deck is fine. Like, I think, this is gonna sound surprising, but Garmor can kind of manage, because Garmor pumps up the field as well, so it kind of balances out that minus 10k by still being able to hit for some numbers at least. So you're able to hit for at least like 5k guards, you know, not the same like overwhelming pressure as before, but it's still something. And then with some, like, I think like with Kagero, like, this is pretty easy matchup for Murakumo, because like, wow, big waterfall, too bad that it lost 10k and now you can guard it easily. So that's kind of, you know, something else to consider. But I think DP loses out. Most Axel clans, like maybe not Garmor, but most Axel clans I would say lose out on a lot of advantage as well. Like even Great Nature, despite being this kind of like really strong Axel clan, I think they even lose out on quite a lot. And so I think for a lot of decks it's hard to combat this. Only for some decks where they kind of like refresh their Vanguard, so like Dark Irregulars with No Life King, they kind of circumvent Shirayuki. Like DP, if you reach that power threshold regardless, sure, with Great Ayusha you also circumvent that. And then Royals also with Exculpate can kind of work around it, but then they're like, if you're losing so much power on your first Exculpate swing, which is usually like an unboosted like 24, 34, like it's gonna be kind of iffy too. But then you look at stuff like Narukami where like, you know, if they didn't ride over the Stinger, their drill is swinging for like what, 12k or like with a boost like 21, 23, and then like, you know, that's gonna be just like what, 12 or 13 or even below 10, and then restand attack for like what, 7? It's pretty depressing, it's pretty sad, but like Shirayuki just does a lot for this format, I think, and that's going to be the main reason why I think, at least in the English side of things, we're going to see a lot of Murakumo topping again in Standard. I know that in Japan, like it was topping a lot, but Axel clans aren't very popular, and Murakumo isn't that popular either. It was just topping because like there would be many players, but those not many players would still top because the deck's so good and they know how to pilot it. So that's kind of part of the reason why it can perform so well. So those are my thoughts on the new problem child of Standard. So this is kind of, I think, really, I hope that, you know, with future support, like either Murakumo is going to be less played, but I think like Murakumo is getting another wave of support later this year anyway, so we'll see if it gets more ridiculous, or if they just bring in an even better grade 3 that you would want to play instead of Shirayuki, or if you're just they're gonna bring in more support for Shirayuki. But I don't think so. Like, these three cards already work so well together that I don't think it's necessary, so that's just kind of like my thoughts and opinions on that. So let me know what you guys think of the new problem child of Standard in Shirayuki and her two friends. If you're already playing the deck, let me know how it feels for you and how you're doing in tournaments. If you've lost against the deck, feel free to rant in the comments as well, but I mean, that's just kind of my perspective on this whole thing. But you know, I do want to see a discussion going as well. So that's going to be it for me today. Don't forget to check out all the good things in the description and click the bell button, etc, etc. But I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.